Chapter 12 is the cardiovascular system. So, what is the cardiovascular system exactly? The cardiovascular system is, of course, made up of the heart, okay, uh, the heart, veins, arteries, and of course, what is inside of your veins and arteries is blood. So as we learn the material in this chapter, we're going to work on one um, one aspect of the system at a time. So the first thing we're going to talk about is blood. Blood has a incredibly important role. One of the major roles that it has is to transport nutrients and wastes and your hormones. Your hormones travel through in your bloodstream. Okay, blood also is responsible for regulation, regulating your body temperature, regulating your water volume, and regulating your blood pH. And of course, defense. We have white blood cells that defend our body, and we, of course, have platelets that stop us from bleeding out if we receive an injury. So let's look at the components of blood. Okay, so here you'll see this is a test tube that has been centrifuged. So that means it's been put into a centrifuge machine, which spins very, very quickly. And when you spin something that fast, all of the heavy stuff falls to the bottom, and all of the light weight material will stay at the top. Okay, so our blood is composed of plasma, and that makes up 55% of your blood. Plasma, what is plasma? Okay, plasma is water, electrolytes, proteins such as albumins, globulins, clotting proteins. You may remember albumin from lab. Hormones are found here. All of your hormones that get released into the blood, they're going to be found in the plasma because they're so small and lightweight that they end up in the plasma. And then, of course, gases, oxygen and CO2, nutrients and waste. Now, what is referred to as formed elements is, of course, our red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning of blood cells, white, red, and platelets, and see where they come from. You may or may not already know this, but of course, we get all of our blood cells and platelets from our stem cells. Our stem cells are located, not all of them, but our stem cells, a lot of them, are found inside of red bone marrow. And of course, we have red bone marrow inside of our bones, especially long bones like this one. Okay, so inside of the red bone marrow, we have stem cells. And as you know, stem cells are capable of becoming almost anything. They are instructed to go on and become specialized cells. And what we're showing here is the origin of red blood cells. So a red blood cell is actually called an erythroblast. An erythrocyte, but of course if you remember from previous chapter, erythroblast is an immature red blood cell. Notice that it actually has a nucleus at this point, and that as it becomes mature, it's going to lose the nucleus. The nucleus gets kicked off, and then we have our erythrocyte, which is a mature red blood cell with no nucleus. These are one of the only cells in your body that do not carry your entire genome because the nucleus is kicked off. Now we have a range of white blood cells, and okay, so we also have white blood cells, and we have various white blood cells called leukocytes. We have both granular leukocytes in this category and granular leukocytes. And then, of course, we have our platelets. Now, all originate from stem cells, which come from the red bone marrow, and, of course, differentiate into various types of blastulo cells like erythroblast, monoblast, myeloblast, lymphoblast, and so on. All right. This is important, but not test material. Let's talk about erythrocytes, our red blood cells. Their primary function is to transport oxygen and CO2. They are filled with this protein called hemoglobin. So here what we're looking at is red blood cells inside of a capillary. And if we were to take one red blood cell and look at it, it has this concave shape, and inside it's packed with this protein called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is made up of subunits of heme, and if you look very close here, there's iron. Okay, now hemoglobin's job is to carry oxygen and help deliver them to every single cell in every single tissue in all of your organs throughout the entire body. They have to receive a constant supply of oxygen so that they can all run cellular respiration and make ATP. And then, of course, CO2 in turn is picked up. Now, hemoglobin has iron in it. Iron, when it meets oxygen, it rusts. It becomes rusty. Iron is still a metal, no matter how small the iron molecule is, it's still a metal. It meets oxygen, it's going to rust, therefore giving us this red color, and that is why your red blood cells are actually red in appearance, because oxygen is interacting with iron and making it rust, giving a red appearance. Okay, now how does your body know when to make red blood cells? Well, that all comes from the brain. And ultimately, because these red blood cells don't live a long time, we need a constant production of red blood cells, and that's done so by this hormone called erythropoietin. Leukocytes. Leukocytes are white blood cells, so the term leukemia is cancer of the white blood cells, which is a terrible cancer, but that is where the term comes from. Now, leukocytes are necessary. They're part of our immune system. They save our lives constantly. We couldn't live without them. For example, AIDS patients, they have an incredibly low white blood cell count. Therefore, they don't have an immune system, not a fully functional one. All right. So they protect from infection, and of course they have a role in the inflammatory reaction. There's two major types of leukocytes, granular and agranular. Granular, there's three types. There's neutrophils, eosinophils, neutrophils right here, eosinophil, basophil. And see how the reason why they're called granular is because there's these little tiny granules inside of these cells versus agranular monocytes and lymphocytes. And they don't have granules. Okay, so let's look closer at these cells. Granular leukocytes, now neutrophils. So most of your leukocytes, 60%, are going to be neutrophils. And they are the first on the scene, ready to fight an infection, whether it's a viral, bacterial, it doesn't matter. These guys are the ones that show up and they phagocytose a microorganism. And the way that you identify a neutrophil, whether it's a physical, a photo, or it's an actual physical slide, which we would normally see in lab. But there's one way to identify neutrophils, and it's because they have a multi-lobed nucleus. Multi means more than two. So see this neutrophil here? It has 1, 2, 3, 4 lobes of the nucleus. That is how I know it's a neutrophil. The eosinophil is a bi-lobed nucleus. Bi means 2, and it has 1, 2. These are pretty specialized. These are designed to attack larger parasites, and they have a role in allergic reactions. Basophils. Basophils under the microscope are just filled with these granules. These are histamine granules that have a role in inflammation as well. We have them at a relatively low concentration. Granular leukocytes. Okay, so these ones are just as important, but to me, I feel like these are some of the most important ones. For example, let's start with monocytes. So monocytes, okay, they can leave. Well, first of all, let's look at the nucleus. So they have this kidney bean shaped nucleus. That's what it's typically referred to, and that is how you identify a monocyte. The shape of the nucleus. In fact, that's how you identify any of the leukocytes. Okay, and ultimately these will go on and become something called a macrophage, which has a huge role in the adaptive immune system. Same as lymphocytes, they have a big role in the adaptive immune system. You identify a lymphocyte because it looks like this. 95% of the cytoplasm is occupied by the nucleus. So you kind of see this little crescent moon shape of the cytoplasm, and then that's a lymphocyte. And these guys have a super important role. They make 2 major types of cells, B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes. B lymphocytes make your antibodies, and T lymphocytes can destroy cells that are infected, whether they're cancerous cells, infected with a virus. The lymphocytes are the precursor to both. I'm going to show you a couple of videos.
The white blood cells are an important part of our body's immune system. Neutrophils are a special group of white blood cells that play an extremely important role in protecting the body against infections. Mature neutrophils do not divide. New neutrophils are constantly formed in the bone marrow where they develop and mature. Mature neutrophils are released into the blood where they circulate for 3 to 12 hours and then move to other tissues where they survive only 2 to 3 days. These mature neutrophils can be found in large and small blood vessels, as well as in the tiny capillaries in different tissues. In the bloodstream, neutrophils act as surveillance cells searching for infections. Neutrophils can sense a site of infection because of chemicals that are released by the bacteria. Upon detecting these chemicals, neutrophils slow down and begin to stick to the walls of the blood vessel. They then squeeze between the cells of the blood vessel wall and enter the infected tissue. Here, the neutrophils crawl towards the infection as they continue following the chemical signals. At the site of infection, bacteria are coated with antibodies of the immune system and marked for ingestion. The neutrophil recognizes the marked bacterium, engulfs it into its body, and traps the bacterium in a sac called a phagosome. The neutrophil contains pouches called lysosomes, which are full of digestive enzymes and chemicals that can kill bacteria. The pouches, or lysosomes, then combine with the phagosomes containing the bacteria and release the enzymes and chemicals, resulting in the ultimate death of the bacterium inside the neutrophil. After killing and digesting the bacteria, the neutrophil is spent. Having completed its duty, the neutrophil shrinks in size and breaks up into smaller pieces that can be recognized and eaten by other cells.
Okay, so those are our red blood cells and white blood cells, or leukocytes and erythrocytes. Now, the next thing is our platelets. So platelets are not involved in the immune system, but they have an incredibly important protective role because of the fact that they can stop blood flow and blood loss. And so when you have an injury, platelets are involved in healing. They are derived from megakaryocytes, which we saw in that stem cell slide, but that's not, a focal point here. The most important thing about platelets is they have a role in something called hemostasis. All right, which is the natural process of blood flow and blood loss, stopping it. Hemostasis has 3 stages. Vascular spasm. So first of all, let's look closely at this. Now, there's a tear in this vascular tissue. So when that happens, that is the beginning. The body's going to know. And immediately there's going to be a vascular spasm, which means that the smooth muscle that makes up your vascular tissue is going to vasoconstrict, or in other words, is going to contract. Okay, and that's the first step. The second step is the platelet plug formation. So there's going to be platelets congregating in the wound or in the damaged area, and it's going to make this little mesh network between platelets and collagen fibers and fibrin, and it's basically going to that little mesh network is going to trap red blood cells, more platelets, and clot. And this is called coagulation. So when we talk about blood coagulation, this is what it is. And ultimately, hemostasis, okay, is a 3-stage process that heals damaged tissue. All right, this is just for fun. Medicinal leeches. So medicinal leeches have been used for a long time. Ultimately, leeches have been used to basically pull blood. Their saliva has chemicals that can dilate our blood vessels and prevent it from clotting. So if someone has a blood clotting disorder, for example, or they clot too quickly, which is incredibly dangerous, this is a treatment that could be used. It's still used, it's just not on the top of the list. Okay, What about blood type? Okay, so blood typing. Now, let's first talk about something called antigens and antibodies. Antigens. Antigens are proteins. And if you look at this red blood cell, see this little protein right here? That is a surface marker protein, aka an antigen. Now, our body is capable of identifying self antigens and indeed foreign antigens. So if you look at the shape, let's zoom in on that actually. If you look at the shape of this antigen versus the shape of the foreign antigen, okay. Now, antigens are there to help the body identify what is self and what is non-self. Therefore, if you get infected with a bacteria, for example, it's going to carry foreign antigens. Viruses are going to have some type of foreign antigen that the body can recognize. And what is our response? Well, of course, our response is to make antibodies. Antibodies are made by the immune system, and they are designed for very specific foreign antigens. Every foreign antigen that you have ever been infected with, your system carries antibodies to fight against that infection if you ever meet it again. Okay, so here's a perfect example. This is a blood transfusion kind of mistake that is very rare. So what we're showing here is these are self antigens, right? These belong to, let's say, you. These are your blood cells. Okay, and let's say that by mistake there was a blood transfusion and the body was transfused with the incorrect blood type with foreign antigens. Of course, the body's immune system is going to make antibodies and they are going to attack. And basically, the antigen antibody complex looks like this. Antibodies have this kind of Y shape and they are antigen specific. And this will take some time, but eventually there are going to be more than one antibody connected to various antigens or to that antigen, the foreign antigen, and they make this antigen antibody complex that allows the immune system to kind of red flag this whole situation and destroy it because it's foreign. It's not yours. It's not your body's, so your immune system assumes it's a threat. All right, so we know that there is blood type A. People have blood type B. There's people with A, B, and O. People with blood type A, their body makes antigen A on the surface of red blood cells. Their body at the same time makes antibodies against blood type B that will attack blood type B. People that have blood type B, their body creates antigen B on the red blood cell, and their immune system creates anti-A antibodies that are ready to attack A, blood type A, if they encounter it, which they shouldn't. But there have been mistakes in the past in hospitals and during blood transfusions. People that have blood type AB, now this is a codominant situation in genetics, they express both antigens, both antigen A and antigen B. Now when it comes to blood, there's no antibodies to attack either because there's both antigens in this blood type. So they neither have A nor B antibodies. People with blood type O, They have no antigens on the blood cell, and their body indeed makes both antibodies A and B. Okay, so here's the thing. Because people with blood type O have antibodies against A and B, they can only get O, and that is it. However, the interesting thing about blood type O is that they don't carry any antigens, which means that they are a universal donor. They can be donated to this people with this blood type, people with this blood type, and this blood type. Okay, so they're universal donors. However, they cannot, just write that in, universal donors. Okay, people with O blood type. Okay, but they can only receive O. What's interesting though is because of the fact that people with AB, oh, I think I did that wrong. Okay, let's try that again. Aha. Okay, people with blood type AB, they don't have any antibodies, right? So they are universal receivers. All right, everybody else, on the other hand, these guys can only get B. These guys can only get A. AB can get both. I'm sorry, these guys can get A and O, B and O. These guys can get all blood types, and these guys can only get O, or their body will go into this full-on attack mode. And if, for example, someone was given the wrong blood type, what's the worst that could happen? They could die. They could have a heart attack. They could die because the immune system is launching an attack on the transfused blood. So we have to be super careful. And there hasn't been a mistake in a long time in the hospitals because they know this. But it's still possible. There could be a mistake. All right, so let's talk about blood disorders. Blood disorders for red blood cells. The primary one is anemia, of course. When someone's anemic, they have low oxygen, which is an issue. Having low oxygen is going to definitely affect everything. Every single cell in your body needs a constant supply of oxygen to run cellular respiration. And people that are anemic have low oxygen because they have, typically there's different reasons, but one of the reasons is because of low iron or the inadequacy of being able to either carry O2 in hemoglobin or a low RBC count. White blood cells, on the other hand, disorders with white blood cells, leukemia, cancer of the white blood cells, blood poisoning. So, for example, when somebody is septic, that means that their bacterial infection is far beyond the body's defenses. It has overwhelmed the body's defenses, and that is called septic or blood poisoning. Thrombocytopenia. Okay, now this is not horrible, but it's not great. This is when platelets are low, and it's going to lead to bruising and unusual bleeding. Not good, not great at all.